Hello and welcome to Script Mate, the podcast for writers who dream of seeing their words spoken by paid actors on some sort of screen. I'm your host, Tim Schulberger, writer and founder of Write LA, a script coaching and screenplay competition I'll talk more about later, or constantly. Joining me is the highly skilled and wildly opinionated writer,
Sure.
Tony Giambuso.
Hello.
Giambuso?
Giambuso.
Yeah. We're going to spend the next 10 minutes practicing. Hi, Tony. How are you?
I'm well. How are you, Tim?
I'm okay. Yeah, feeling pretty good. Coming up on this episode, we'll explore the whole write what you know catchphrase. Hopefully you've heard of write what you know and why it's wildly simplistic and often misinterpreted, very often misinterpreted. We'll also have movie and TV moments. We look at stuff that works and stuff that, well, doesn't, like my voice right now. We'll take a swing at I'm going to take a swing at a popular Oscar hopeful.
Okay.
This current Oscar season. Tony will ask me questions you've sent in, maybe even two this time, and I will dazzle Tony with more Australian film trivia because he loves it so much, don't you?
I do.
But first, we always start out our podcast with what we're thinking about. Tony, what's on your mind?
This is just a small thing I think about when I'm writing, reading, watching stuff, and it's this idea of competency scenes. It's the moment in a script or a movie or a TV show where the show is basically like reaching out and just saying, just so you know, this character is really good at this thing. Okay. Whether it's the most recent one I watched was in the show Cross, the Alex Cross show.
Oh, yeah.
With Alice Hodge. And it's like we have to show that he is a brilliant interrogator. He's smarter than everybody. And so there's just a scene in the first episode where they're interrogating this guy, and the detectives that are there are like, we can't get anywhere with this guy. And they're like, bring in Cross. And he comes in and he crushes it, and the guy confesses, and it's amazing. And you're like, all right, cool. And I think sometimes when I'm writing scripts, I need to establish that a character, maybe it's not the main character, is really good at a thing, but it's not necessarily what the movie is about. And so I'm like, how much do I really need to learn about this thing just to write this one little monologue where it establishes what the character is doing? I see it a lot in scripts about stand-up, where stand-up on the page is really hard to get across as funny because stand-up is so much about the person standing on the stage and the energy.
Yeah.
And sometimes the base is like, this person is great at stand-up. Let me prove it to you. And then you go, well, maybe they're not that good at stand-up.
And now it's a murder mystery.
But then, they're great at stand-up. And then the person comes on stage and says, that was the best stand-up I've ever heard. And then you're like, ugh. And it's just really hard. And so, the easier ones are like Sherlock Holmes. He solves a crime early to say, this is what I can do. This is my competency, whether it's music or cooking. And a lot of it comes from the reactions of the other characters to that person. If it's music, obviously you can't really drop a link. So you say, through the eyes of the people that are watching that character play music, oh, they're overwhelmed. Oh, this is as good as X, Y, and Z. So there's just this idea of whenever I'm writing or watching something, I go, oh, that's the competency scene. That's the scene where they have to prove that the character is good at this thing.
Okay. I would argue mildly against that, or say yes, but because I do see a lot of scripts where writers feel the need to explain their characters before they start the story, and what you lose because, as we all know, the first 10 pages is really important. I used to ignore that, but it's true. The first 10 pages is really important. For everybody in the industry, that's kind of what they give you to see if you've got any chops. So a lot of scripts I see from writers who are still learning the craft is that they'll spend that 10 pages just introducing the character. Mm-hmm. It's just scene setting. It's like, this is his or her world. This is what she does. This is what she eats for breakfast. This is her sister or her crazy roommate or her job, whatever it is. Here it all is, and now we'll start. Now that you know everything, we will start. So I would caution not getting too lost in the competency scene and stuff too early or too much, spending too much time with that, because it can really get in the way of your story. And we, the reader and the industry, we lose patience very quickly. We'll talk about this later episodes, but the quick one I have is if you're walking down the street and you see a guy on a cell phone and he's wearing a suit and he's sobbing, you're immediately being like, well, what's going on there? Like we all are, because we're all nosy. We know nothing about that guy except he owns a suit and a phone. And yet we're intrigued to learn more. Like, what's the story? What's making him cry? Who's he talking to? What's going on? Ooh, this looks juicy. and we know nothing. So you can get away with a lot less character introduction than you probably think you should, because we, the audience, will catch up. We'll get going. If you give us a reason to care, like Brockmire melting down, as we mentioned in the last podcast, if you haven't listened to it, he melts down in the first 2 minutes. We're instantly like, okay, this guy's broken. So what happens now? So, and we know nothing really about him apart from he wears this really loud jacket and his wife was having a sex orgy in their house. So yeah, that's all. That's all I say.
Yeah, I think definitely set it. You have to set it. Follow all the rules of traditional character building and set it in action. Yeah. Brockmire is a good example because even though he's breaking down, he's still a very good announcer. And it's really funny, this like juxtaposition of this really, really competent announcer, the voice, the expression, but he's breaking down. And then the people in the audience are like, what is happening to this guy? This isn't a normal day for Brockmire.
Exactly.
Or, maybe this one's too much, but like Indiana Jones opens with Indiana Jones being Indiana Jones.
Yes, although we can't talk about Indiana Jones.
We can't.
No, not the first one. Not the Indiana Jones and what's it called?
Raiders of the Lost Ark is the first
one. Lost Ark. It went right out of my head. Raiders of the Lost Ark. Yeah, we can't talk about that because that breaks all the rules. Don't tell anyone.
Okay.
Breaks
all right.
all the screenwriting rules.
All right,
and yet it still made money. So yeah, please. We'll just curse that one. Okay, what's on my mind? I've been thinking lately about writing because I'm trying to write a musical at the moment and a play. But part of me, you get that. Do you ever get that swirling feeling where it's like I have competing ideas? Which one should I write? Which one's going to, break me through? Which one's going to sell quicker? Which one's going to make me money?
Yeah.
Is this one too ridiculous? Is it not ridiculous enough? Is this what I'm feeling right now? Is this what aspect of my human condition do I want to explore? Is this hitting that, or is it something else? Am I wasting my time? Just that sort of swirly indecisiveness that you get. That's been on my mind, and it's a challenging thing to get through because it leads to procrastination and it leads to, maybe I should clean the house, or maybe I should promote Write LA, the screenwriting competition, more than writing my own script. So it's that's been an interesting thing to notice. It's like, okay, so I'm thinking about all that stuff. So what I did, I went to a coffee shop and I wrote down all my ideas, and then I sort of tried to explore all my ideas, and I kept coming back to one that actually wasn't on the page, which was the musical, which is so insane that I was like, I don't know if I can write this. But then the more I thought about all the other ones, I kept coming back to this one. So I was like, okay, let's just do this.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm doing.
I think it's good to have a lot of ideas going at once, but what I find myself falling into the trap is that I'm just doing the fun bits. So I'll work on a script, it'll be really fun, I'll have an idea, and then I get up to a wall and I say, I don't really know what to do next. And instead of going through that, I just go, oh, you know what? I'll jump over that other script.
Yes.
And then I'm just taking and I'm never breaking through for any of them. And maybe that's a good exercise, maybe it's a bad exercise, but at the end of the day, you have to look at like, if that's your process, but you're also getting out X amount of scripts a year and you're writing, then great, stick with that process.
Yeah.
But if you feel like that's your process and you're not writing as much as you want, well then maybe you need it.
And also I think in understanding that writing's hard work. And there are times where it's just ugly, and there are times where you have a bad day, or you have like I don't know what to do and I don't know what's going on. And rather than just abandon it and say this is a stupid idea, I'm going to go feed my cat or adopt a cat. That's the time where you're supposed to kind of sit in it and be like, no, I'm here for a reason. Let's keep going.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm thinking about.
Great.
All right. Our topic today is write what you know. Now, how to put this delicately? Write what you know has been perceived in a lot of scripts that I read through Write LA. Just a reminder, I am the head judge of Write LA. I read about 300 scripts a year. Tony is a reader on Write LA. He reads a lot as well. So we see a lot of scripts from people who have yet to break into the industry. That's my whole thing is to try to help people break into the industry. The write what you know thing, I see a lot in a way where people are writing autobiographical scripts. I see a lot of scripts where people are writing like their version of coming out, which is always admirable and always heartfelt, and but also often misses the point of what write what you know should mean. So it gets interpreted from people like write what you know, and you go to panels and it's like, oh, okay, yeah, I draw from your own experience, draw from your own life, and that gets interpreted as I'm going to write something about something that happened to me, and that's on a logistical like life experience type way. And that's not what it means. And I don't think that gets discussed enough, which is why we're sitting here discussing it. Because what it should mean, write what you know should mean from an emotional point of view. What emotional experiences have you got? What trauma have you got locked away in there? What sort of feelings do you have? And then how can you put them in to an entertaining story for strangers who don't know you and your life? And it doesn't have to, in fact, I would argue it shouldn't be necessarily some anecdote from an experience, from a life experience that you lived through. It should be more of an emotional experience that you have and an emotional what you have in your emotional toolbox. So it's more like, I used to say write what you know, but make it accessible to strangers. That was sort of my cutesy extension because I thought write what you know was too simplistic. I would sort of make it more like write what you felt and put that into a story that is interesting and compelling. And it doesn't have to be your story. Because let's be honest, most of us, Tony and I included, or at least me, haven't lived particularly interesting lives. I guess I've, moved countries, but
it's a privilege to not have to live a crazy, interesting life. That means that I've just...
Right, we've just lived lives. And most people have lived lives. And you've seen stuff and you've met people. And you get kind of lost in this, I've got to write something that's passionate and means something to me. And then you end up writing something it also falls into the sort of biographical film issue. And biofilms are... I'm sorry if you're listening to this and you're writing a biofilm as your first script, because I'm going to actively encourage you to put it down and write something else. Because writing a bio script straight out of the blocks, A, really hard to get made. B, really hard to put into the 3-act structure. And what you're left with, you get this, and then this happens, and then this happens, and then this happens, and then this happens. It's like, here is my life in a series of events. And you don't have the traditional 3-act structure. You don't have the emotional journey. You don't have all that. You're just sort of saying, look how cool this person was and all the cool stuff they did. Aren't you fascinated like I am?
Yeah.
And write what you know falls into that category. Look at all this stuff that happened to me. Aren't you fascinated by that? Because it was really hard or really fun or really something to me. How do you make that interesting to people who don't know you and your story? If you hone really close to your own truth, you're making it that much harder. Because you want to stick to your truth, and your truth may not be as interesting as you think it is to people who don't know you.
Yeah, I think when you're writing about something that happened to you or a life experience that you had, sometimes I notice this thing where it's like the arm's length thing. I think a lot of times people do this weird thing where emotionally they still keep the audience at arm's length. They're not willing to fully go there and be as vulnerable as they want to be.
Definitely.
And so it's like, but do that, but then also don't be afraid to narrativize your story. Add some layers onto your story that it doesn't have to be you. One of the scripts that I wrote that...
By the way, narrativize, is that a word?
Narrativize, yeah.
It is now.
It is now. I wrote one and it was, the first draft was... I was really sad over an ex, and I just wrote this thing in a weekend. And the name of the main character was Tony, and the woman that he couldn't be with was my ex's name, and everyone else were my friends' names, and it was just, that's what it was. And then that script had to evolve where, okay, this isn't my story. This is the story of a character. Lots of things changed. It became a completely, there was a hook that didn't actually happen in real life that was narrativized. But emotionally, I tried to keep that centerpiece of, okay, so this is that, like, I'm trying to hold on to that really desperate, narcissistic, myopic feeling that I had when I was dumped and I had unrequited love. You want that to like spill off the page because people will say, yeah, I feel that too.
Yeah.
But it doesn't have to be like, yeah, but I didn't say that, but I didn't do that. It's like, well, no, this isn't me anymore. And it almost made it more freeing for me to get more deep and more vulnerable when the character wasn't literally me. Obviously, Some people have some insane life experiences. And that's what I want to bring up, because you mentioned this last time about gaining life experience, travel and this and that. And what's interesting is that sometimes people will say, in order to be a good writer, you have to have massive life experience. And I don't think that is true. I think that to be a good writer, you have to have certain skills, and that's, listening, being curious. You mentioned that last time, and you're building those tools. And then once you have those tools, then yes, if you travel, if you have experiences, if you see the world, if you meet people from all different, well, then you're gonna use those tools and you're gonna pick up on more of those things. But just doing those things in general, there's lots of people who travel the world who are not great writers.
No.
But also life experience like you cannot escape life experience. Like you could sit in a room and do nothing for 25 years, but people in your life are still going to get cancer. You're still going to lose parents. You're still going to, lose a pet. You're still going to, like, these things are still going to happen to you.
Very miserable.
No, but I'm just, well, yeah. But like
Can you also get laid or get married?
Well, yeah.
Have like a positive?
But I just mean, like, even if you are rejecting life, if you're saying, I'm not going to go find, I'm just going to sit here and do nothing. It's like, well, too bad. Like stories, the world is coming for you in a way. And so you can't escape those feelings. And so, even if you're not going and the writer's like, I have to go and like backpack through Europe or whatever. It's like, if that's what you want to do it. Like, that's great. But don't think of yourself of less of a writer if you're not doing that. It's kind of what we're talking about, right? What is right. The feelings, like Tim said, the feelings and the energy of something. And then you're translating that through a character, through a story to a reader that has their own, like, oh, leaving home. And it's like, well, it could be about leaving home in the 15th century. It doesn't matter. You could be writing it based on when you had to leave home for college.
Right.
And in the 2020s, and so, and that will come through for the reader.
Yeah. And there are plenty of backpacking through Europe stories that are just, here I am backpacking through Europe. It's almost like a slideshow. It's like, and here I was in Italy. Here I was here, and here I was. Oh, I met this quirky person at this, hostel. It doesn't make it a compelling movie. So yeah, I agree. Life experience. You have to be open to life experience. I would still suggest that you don't necessarily spend all day on your couch at home.
Of course.
I think you can learn a lot from some observing other people and thinking about things, and you also get a fresh perspective. Sometimes you can get really lost in a way of thinking. Going somewhere else, seeing something else is a bit freeing, even if it's a road trip to Palm Springs. I'm not saying you need to go backpacking around Europe. I'm just saying the more you can kind of, treat your brain to new things, the more your brain is able to kind of give you new options and new ideas when you're trying to sit down and figure out a problem. And also gives you that write what you know toolbox becomes richer and more vibrant, because you're not only just necessarily focusing on just your feelings, but also perhaps it's your empathy towards somebody else, or how you reacted when you saw someone going through something. Or you learn about, like, I just went on a road trip and I met this woman, Peg, who has never left Platteville, Wisconsin, and she runs the local diner. And you could think, oh, you don't care about anything outside the world. But everybody who came into that restaurant at her diner, she knew their entire emotional backstory.
Yeah.
So what does life look like for someone like that? Like, am I too afraid to leave, or I don't want to leave, and yet I still care deeply about other people. So I wouldn't have those thoughts about a character if I hadn't have seen that character, that person in the world. But I'm not going to write Peg's story.
Yeah.
Because, I'm not. I don't know enough, and it's not. So, and I wouldn't necessarily want to read Peg's script if she wrote one about life in a diner. Maybe it's compelling, maybe it's not. But if it was just about life in a diner over 60 years, it may not be good. So the write what you know aspect is very much not about the daily life, more about the internal life.
I love it.
All right.
So movie moments?
Movie moments. You can lead.
I'll lead. Okay. So I'm going to talk about a moment. I'm going to go positive on this one. A moment in a little movie called The Sixth Sense.
Okay.
Which is a movie that I love and a script that I love. And I'm trying to pull up. Come
on, we're running out of time, Tony. Come on.
Oh, come on. So it's worth it. No, so I listened to an interview.
Don't give away the ending.
Shyamalan. I will. Actually, I won't. An interview with Shyamalan where he said he's naturally a very sentimental writer, and that he uses genre to sort of break down the sentimentality, to earn the sentimentality. And so one of my favorite scenes in any movie is the car scene at the end of Sixth Sense, where Haley Joel Osment's character is finally he's sort of had his big growth. He's realized that I can help the ghosts and I don't have to be afraid of them. And finally he can communicate to his mother, played by Toni Collette, who has felt like she can't communicate with him because she doesn't know what's wrong with him. And he can't say, I see dead people, because she'll just send him to a shrink. That's in the trailer. That's not the twist.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so there's a scene in the car where he finally tells her, and her mother has passed away, and he's telling her that he spoke to her mother, and she doesn't really believe him at first, because why would she? And he says, she saw you and she went to your dance recital. You didn't know she was there. She said you danced like an angel. And then there's this way he sets up this dialogue that I love, where Haley Joel Osment says, she said you came to her where they buried her, asked her a question. She said the answer is every day. And she covers her face. She's crying. And he says, what did you ask? And his mom says, do I make you proud? Aww. And it's the way that he said it. He didn't say, you went to the grave. What did you ask her? Do I make you proud? She said every day. It's like he said the answer first, right, and then the question. And it is a very sentimental moment. But in that one sentence, both two parent-child relationships have been resolved. It's her and him have finally connected. She realizes that he's not sick. He just has this ability, and he's communicating with her. And she clearly, by the nature of that question, do you make me proud? That means she never felt like her mother had answered that question. Right. And so in that one sentence, she both has connected to her mother and her son at the same time. And it's like, yes, now you have to do the 85% of the movie that comes before that to earn that moment. And there's ghosts and there's spooky stuff. Sure. But in that moment, we are all in. So I love that moment of that movie. And I think and then right after that is the big twist. Right. So you're like reeling from that. And then all of a sudden they're like, we got one more trick up our sleeve. So.
Yeah, I think that's great. And we should certainly discuss in future dialogue and how the way you use it can be really impactful. It's not just using it. Yeah. So we're running low on time, so I'm going to speed through mine. Anora is the film. I've written a review on my website if you want to get more details. But for me, Anora, it's a film about a sex worker who falls in love with a Russian oligarch's son. They get married, and then the oligarch finds out and they undo the marriage. That's really it. It's too long. It's over 2 hours long. A lot of people talking over one another, blah, blah, blah. But for me, the big issue is, and I encourage you to go and see it. It is apparently going to get nominated for Best Film, which is, okay. Go and see it. For me, the ending is very problematic. And the more I think about it, the more it bothers me, because you have this very fierce, magnificently performed character who's a sex worker, and Mikey Madison is remarkable and should have a lengthy career. She's brilliant. And she really gets into under the skin of a sex worker. And her resolution, the climax of the movie, the end, after she goes through all of this stuff, is disappointing. And it bothers me because it leans on tropes. I don't necessarily want to go too far into it because I'd like you to see it, and plus it's out at the moment.
Yeah, I haven't seen it, but we will discuss.
But it leans on a trope, and I find it a very disappointing trope when you have worked so hard in a script to build this fierce, independent character who is taking care of herself, who is sort of making mistakes but sort of trying to adjust to them, and then you give her this ending which is like, do you writer, director really understand the trauma involved in sex work? Have you investigated this, or have you delved into the mindset of this, or are you operating on the fringes? And that's what I find was disappointing. And I also find it a bit disappointing about the reaction to the film, because it's like, Pretty Woman did this. It's like, this is I thought we were past that. I thought we were further down the line, that most people involved in sex work aren't doing it because they choose to and because it's really cool. They may choose to, but they're usually operating under there's some trauma in there somewhere and something to be explored. And so it was so well set up, only to just veer off into a trope, and I'm disappointed.
Well, I look forward to discussing it after I see it. Do you want to do a question?
Yes.
Okay, I'll do a quick one. So this question is, how important are character names to the initial writing process? I have a hard time continuing writing a draft if the names don't feel right to me.
I don't think they're important at all. Okay. I find names in my writing awful. They're normally Jack. It's just awful. But I would say, if it matters to you, if it's something that you feel it really informs who that character is by what they're named, and that's something, then sure, spend some time on it. but I wouldn't spend too much time on it because that's a little bit of a distraction. Because it's really not. I mean, I've read how many hundreds of scripts, thousands of scripts. Can I name any characters? And the films I've seen, can I name any characters? The only ones that really pop into mind are Jack and Rose from Titanic, because James Cameron is not a great screenwriter, and he uses their names in every single line of dialogue. Oh, yeah. So it's beaten. You're literally beaten to death with their names in that movie. So apart from that, I mean, I don't really feel like names are super important.
Yeah, I think in the final version of a script, you know, the length of the name, what the name says about someone. But if you're talking about, and like the readability of the name, but if you're talking about just writing, coming up with a name just in order to get into the writing process, it doesn't matter. I usually just, a lot of times what I do is I look up NFL rosters and they have just really incredible names. You know, Storm Norton is someone's name. And so you're just, you can take little pieces of people's names and put them in, if you want something that's not, you know, Jack and Rose. But I think it really is what works for you.
Yeah, and also don't use it as a distraction, because we're always looking for ways to be like, oh, I can't think of their names. I've got to go and have a coffee now. You know, I'll write tomorrow because I can't think of what their name is. So perhaps don't let it get to that point. Just find working and you can always change them. And you can always, once a producer gets hold of a script, they'll always like, you know what, I love this script, but can we change the name? You know, and so it's a fluid thing. It's not crucial. So
tell me something about Australia.
Did you know that Australia made the world's first feature-length movie?
No.
There you go. 1906, The Story of the Kelly Gang was the first feature-length film. Wow. Up until that point, they'd been making 10-minute movies around the world. And these Australian brothers were like, you know what, we're going to make a longer one. So they made The Story of the Kelly Gang. Ned Kelly was a notorious bushranger, like a thief, like a highway robbery type guy. And he was a bit of a folk hero in the late 1800s. And then he ended up being caught and hanged. And they made this film that was sort of sympathetic to him. So it actually got the Victorian government, the state government, tried to ban it. But it played in a lot of theatres. They sort of traveled. They had one print and it moved around and it earned a considerable amount of money. They reckon it cost about, because I know you're going to ask, it cost £1,000, which is in today's dollars is around about 200,000 Australian dollars, which is around about 127,000 US dollars. The creators say they made about 25 times their nut, so it did well. And then it got banned, but then it didn't get banned. And it was apparently the inspiration for the narrative film structure. It was sort of the beginning. But they also did a really cool thing because it was silent, but they would have actors come into the theater and read some of the stuff out loud in person. So
can we replace The Birth of a Nation with this movie as the movie that started movies and continuity editing? Yeah. Much rather choose that, unless this is a super racist movie.
We didn't. No, we were keeping that quiet at that point, our racism. So, I don't know if you can see it anywhere. The Australian Film and Sound Archive has it, and you can read about it. But The Story of the Kelly Gang is the first full-length feature film ever made in the world, and it was made by Australians in Australia.
Amazing.
Yeah. So ScriptMate, this is all we have time for, obviously, while we're running through this. ScriptMate is brought to you by Write LA. It's a website where you can get all sorts of information about writing, learn about my script consulting services, and get all details for our annual competition, Write LA. Write LA is now open for entries. You can go to the website to learn more. We're open until March 4th. We accept pilots and features. Why you should enter. Because you should enter screenplay competitions if you have a script that you feel comfortable with, because you get to sort of judge and see how it's going. I would encourage you to get some feedback as well, but that's up to you. All the feedback is written by me. The scripts are read by very few people. We are actually one of the competitions that don't farm out our reading. It's me, it's Tony, it's very few other people. So we really take this stuff seriously. And then also enter... Well, just actually not also enter because it's up to you what you want to do. But as you think about entering, try to think about it in a positive way. Try to think about it in a way where it's like, you know what, I'm entering as an exercise, not everything is riding on this competition or on this entry. And if I don't do well, I'm a failure. I would ask you not to think that way, because just the mere fact that you've written a script and you've decided to enter it into a competition and you've completed a draft is a victory that you should celebrate. So that's how we treat every script we read. I promise you, every script we read, we're like, we really hope this one's awesome. And even if it's not awesome, it's like, well done for having a go. Mm-hmm. So enter competitions for that reason. or other reasons like, oh, I want to just see how I go, if I can make the quarterfinals this year, or I can see what's going on, or I can just base myself. Just don't put too much pressure on yourself, because, you know, there's always another competition, there's always another draft, and there's always another idea in your head. So, you know, if you want to learn more about us, write-la.com, write-la.com is where you can go, and you can enter there, or you can enter on Coverfly or Film Freeway. That's all the time we have. Sounds good?
Great.
Very good. Thank you for listening. That's the end of the shameless promotion. We're very grateful. We'll be back with more very soon. But until then, say goodbye, Tony.
Goodbye.